This is Guns and Butter.
There's something happening here. Yeah. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there.
Now, people have to understand, one of the reasons why Guantanamo still exists is that it's a prison camp, but it's also a training camp. And this is widely misunderstood. It is a training camp. Within it, you have brainwashing going on, you have courses, training, and so forth. Generally speaking, once you're in Guantanamo Bay, the way you get out is to become a double agent working for the CIA.
I'm Bonnie Faulkner. Today on Guns and Butter, Webster Tarpley. Today's show, the CIA Mormon Mafia and the Benghazi Killings. Webster Tarpley is an economic historian, author, and lecturer. He is author of Against Oligarchy, Surviving the Cataclysm, a study of the world financial crisis, 9/11 synthetic terror, made in the USA, Obama, the postmodern coup, the making of a Manchurian candidate, Obama, the unauthorized biography, and co-author of George Bush, the unauthorized biography. His new book is Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover of America, Polygamy, Theocracy, and Subversion. On today's program, we discuss the origins of the Islamophobic film The Innocence of Muslims, the killings in Benghazi, Libya, and Mormonism. Webster Tarpley, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's so nice to talk to you again.
What can you tell us about the recent Islamophobic film, The Innocence of Muslims, that set off so many demonstrations in the Middle East? What people are behind this film and the spreading of Islamophobia?
Well, let me say, first of all, let me just try to sum up the argument. The first thing I have to say, though, the premise of all this is there is inside the U.S. federal government a network which has escaped the attention it would have deserved over the years. And this is the Mormon Mafia. People may be familiar with the CIA Mormon Mafia, the FBI Mormon Mafia. You can find cases, for example, where Hispanic FBI agents in California have sued the Bureau because they were being discriminated against by Mormon agents, right? The traditional demographic breakdown of the FBI. The FBI breakdown traditionally was the two large factions, maybe we should put it that way, were Mormons and Jesuits. Jesuits, typically law graduates of Fordham University and similar institutions. The Mormons, very much from Mormondom, right, from Brigham Young University and other places. And in the CIA, it's probably even more. And the way you get this Mormon Mafia is young Mormon males, as Mitt Romney did, are sent abroad to work as missionaries, right? Romney went to France. They come back knowing a foreign language, not very common in the United States, right? And they come back knowing some pretty exotic, offbeat languages. They are also straight arrows, right? They practice clean living. They don't drink. They don't smoke. They don't take drugs. They don't womanize. At least this is what they claim. And this makes them in many ways ideal candidates. So there's a kind of an inside track on CIA and FBI recruiting. I think J. Edgar Hoover certainly had a hand in it at a certain phase on the FBI side, but you can also see others. And the one that I would point to most of all is General Brent Scowcroft. For many years, Kissinger's right-hand man. He was the National Security Council director under George H.W. Bush. He was very important in many, many Republican administrations. He's the guy who was sitting in a doomsday aircraft on 9/11, which obviously is worthy of research, which it has not gotten yet. But it's clear that Brent Scowcroft, as a very active and very convinced Mormon, was doing everything he could to recruit people into this CIA Mormon Mafia. And as we can see, if we have time, the Mormons were, how can we say it? They were decidedly soft on fascism and Nazism during the 1930s, which mimicked the attitude of J. Edgar Hoover. J. Edgar Hoover was convinced that the communists, of course, the Soviets were the main enemy. Nazis and fascists were not good, but this was not the main thing. And the Mormons were willing to go along with that. So I would posit the existence of a Mormon faction across the government, across the intelligence community in particular, State Department too, to some extent, I'm sure. And they have a vested interest now because they know that if Romney goes to the top, their careers will be crowned by bigger and better promotions than they could hope for any other way. And equally important for such people, they want their religion vindicated. They feel that, and this is one of the features of Mormonism we have to stress as we talk about it, they have a narrative of persecution. They have a cahier de doléances, right? Gravamina. They have complaints. They've been mistreated. Joseph Smith should have become dictator of the United States in 1844. Instead, he was murdered by those ungrateful Gentiles, those damned Americans, as they say in their literature at various points. So we can expect that this Mormon Mafia will act in favor of Romney. I think that's very fundamental. It's a tight-knit, bitter cult with a history of persecution. The persecution, of course, was real enough. The causes, however, are a little bit more complex than what Mormons might say. But they want their man in. The entire Mormon church went on lockdown on the last Sunday of September. They had a worldwide day of prayer to get Mitt Romney elected. And, of course, prayer, as Brigham Young says, prayer is good, but you gotta get out there and do things, right? When you need baked potatoes, prayer is not enough. So this is the background. Now, what I'm looking at in Benghazi, the film is to package Benghazi for the world to understand it, right? The broader world. We can clearly see that based on the film, you had pretty big demonstrations in 25 countries and even more cities. And that's the big ones. The really big ones were in Egypt on that afternoon of September 11th, in Pakistan, in various European cities, all over the world. There were demonstrations that were specifically about the film. So let's look at the film. But what I'm trying to hold in mind is look now for the Romney campaign, look for the CIA Mormon Mafia, and you'll see that we find it right away. But now let's finally get to the film. The film is important. The Republicans are running away from the film for reasons that you're going to hear right now. The film is important because it is the basis of demonstrations in 25-plus cities in many countries across the world. If we go to the people who made this film, we come across first a little nonentity, a patsy, the so-called Sam Basile, or Akula. He is an ex-con. He's a drug pusher, convicted. He's probably a police informant in the drug world. He's out on parole. His position is very precarious. He is a Coptic Christian. So that's Sam Basile, or real name something like Akula. He is the one who has taken the heat, right? He's the one who's been put back into jail for violating his parole conditions. However, the person who owned the facilities where this film was made, such as it was, and the person who got the permit to make the film, which I guess you need, and then also the person who is the chief executive officer of something called Media for Christ, is a person called Joseph Nasrallah. Now, Joseph Nasrallah is also a Coptic Christian, right? This is a monophysite Christian religion that exists in the Nile Valley, right? It's in Sudan also, but it's about 10% of Egypt. So these are people who have they've coexisted with Muslims for a long time, and they know that provocations are not a good thing, which makes this such a strange thing for a Coptic Christian to do. Now, this Nasrallah leads us right to the matrix of who created the film. In other words, we can understand the film if we just follow Nasrallah a little bit. If we follow Nasrallah, for example, on September 11th, 2010, where do we find him? We find him in a demonstration in Manhattan near Ground Zero, and it's the demonstration against the mosque, right? The Ground Zero Mosque and Islamic Community Center. And you'll remember that was used to whip up hysteria before the congressional elections in August, September, October of 2010. So Nasrallah goes there, and this is a demonstration sponsored by what is generally known now as the Islamophobia Network. If you go to the foundation, the relevant one is the Center for American Progress, which is sort of the progressive wing, maybe center-left of the Democratic Party. The Center for American Progress has a whole study. It's about 125 pages on the Islamophobia Network. Now, you probably know some of these names. Pamela Geller is one of the most prominent. There are other people. They appear on Fox News. There's Walid Fares. We'll get to him in just a minute also. The dominant personality, however, of the network is John Bolton. And indeed, at this demonstration, which is the sort of a centerpiece for the case I'm trying to make, you've got Joseph Nasrallah attending and giving a speech. You got Pamela Geller acting as the chairwoman. You've got all these other people, inveighing against the horrors of Sharia law and so forth. The most prominent speaker at that demonstration, who appeared by videotape, I guess, was John Bolton. John Bolton had been UN ambassador under Bush. He is a top advisor to Romney. He is likely to be Secretary of State if Romney becomes president. John Bolton has the inside track to take over the State Department. And this is typical of the neocons that surround Romney on the foreign policy side. He's got nothing but neocons. He's got Bolton. He's got Robert Kagan. He's got Dan Senor, the spokesman for the occupation in Iraq, who was the handler for Paul Ryan. You might have seen Senor spinning in the spin room last week when the debate, right, the Ryan Biden debate took place. Lots and lots of neocons around Romney, but John Bolton seems to be the top dog among these neocons. So I would argue, just based on this simple analysis, right, we go from the film to Joseph Nasrallah to the Islamophobia Network, and inside the Islamophobia Network, this is clearly right now mobilized in favor of the Romney campaign. There are people in there who are, to a greater or lesser degree, also Israeli assets. You've got Steve Emerson. You've got all sorts of others. But the main thing is that this is now part of the Romney campaign, and the underlying architecture of that is that Mitt Romney and Bibi Netanyahu of Israel have been the closest of close friends since 1976, when they both worked together at the Boston Consulting Group. They have mutually assisted each other's careers. Bibi gives Mitt political advice. Mitt gives Bibi financial advice. It's a wonderful symbiosis. Netanyahu is doing everything he possibly can to get Romney elected, because he's been promised that if that happens, Bibi will get veto power. He will be able to dictate U.S. policy in the Middle East. And Romney promised that in a Republican debate much earlier this year. So I regard the film as a typical provocation from a group of Islamophobic provocateurs who are, tied hand and foot, led by the top foreign policy guy of the Romney campaign, Bolton. And remember, this is the group that did the mosque, the anti-mosque in Manhattan campaign. And if you go to the Bay Area Rapid Transit or the Washington Metro, the New York subway, you're going to find these posters with this stuff about how Muslims are savages, right? That's also the same group. That's the same small group. Pamela Geller, the Islamophobia Network, they have various, specialties. This guy Nasrallah is the Copts. Walid Fares is the Lebanese, Maronite Christians, and so forth. But the top dog is Bolton. So look at the film as the creation of an atmosphere in which an ideological explanation can be applied to what's going to happen in Benghazi. But again, the film is important in itself because it shows that they hate the Americans in 25 cities or 25 countries across the world. Okay? Now, on then to Benghazi.
I'm speaking with economic historian and author Webster Tarpley. Today's show, the CIA Mormon Mafia and the Benghazi Killings. I'm Bonnie Faulkner. This is Guns and Butter. What do we now know about the September 11th attack on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi, Libya, and the killing of Ambassador Stevens? The attack was not carried out by protesters, but by a well-informed and armed group, right?
Right. Now let's also go through this. What you see is the CIA essentially heavily implicated in the people that killed Ambassador Stevens and also the people that failed to defend him. And this I think what it makes is a conclusive, a circumstantial case that forces inside the CIA wanted this killing to happen, and they wanted something tragic, something big to happen, so they could get an October surprise and then use it to Carterize Obama. Remember, Obama was concocted according to a Jimmy Carter printout, right? This was done really by David Rockefeller, Zbigniew Brzezinski, Samuel Huntington, Joseph Nye, the so-called Soft Power Trilateral Commission Group. They had Obama ready, and in many ways, this scenario works best for Wall Street if Obama does go down. They want Obama to go down, right? And that's, I think, what a lot of people in Wall Street, because that gives them a better starting point for the next phase of austerity and oppression that they want to have. Let's just start with the most obvious question, Ambassador Stevens. Now, I'm afraid Ambassador Stevens was very heavily involved in contacts with terrorist groups in that famous corridor from Benghazi to Derna to Tobruk, which I wrote about. I wrote an essay March of 2011 based on the West Point report analysis that the city of Derna in particular had more suicide bombers and heavy-duty terrorists per capita than any place in the world. They beat larger cities in Saudi Arabia, but they beat them on a per capita basis. Derna is the most violent nest of fanaticism anywhere on this planet. Ambassador Stevens had already been there as vice consul to the Benghazi consulate in 2008, 2009, and he was already in close contact with these groups. The groups are left over from the Sanusi Brotherhood. The Sanusi Brotherhood was a group of quasi-Wahhabites, quasi-Salafists, extremists, benighted, reactionary people, misogynists. They were fostered primarily by the British through Egypt because these Sanusis were useful against, in particular, the Italians, right? When they took over Libya about 100 years ago, the Italians came in. So the British began building up these Sanusis, and that's those are the people that Ambassador Stevens was in contact with. The question, though, is, since Stevens was such a good friend of so many of these people in the Benghazi, Derna, Tobruk area, why would they turn on him, right? Why would they decide at a certain point that they're going to kill their old friend? It's also clear that one of the things he was probably doing, which he certainly had done in the past, is to arrange the shipping of these fanatics from Libya to Turkey and then their deployment into Syria, because that's how this was done. Gaddafi was dead by the autumn of last year. That situation was winding down. The U.S., according to my information, organized really an airlift and maybe a sea lift also of equipment to get those fighters, those mujahideen jihadis, from Libya to Turkey and then into Syria. And that's the basis. Those are the death squads that have been the prime element going on in the fighting in Syria ever since. And the story is that on the day he died, September 11th, Ambassador Stevens' last conversation at 8:30 in the evening was with a Turkish diplomat. So why would an American ambassador be talking to a Turkish diplomat in the middle of the biggest terror corridor in the world? And I'm afraid it does point in this direction. But this doesn't account for why he would be killed. As a matter of fact, that's an argument why he would have been safe. Now, the group that is widely regarded as the people who killed him is called Ansar al-Sharia. So it's the Sharia Brigade. And the Ansar al-Sharia is led by a guy called Sufyan ben Kumu. Now, Kumu is either Q-U-M-U or K-U-M-U. Sometimes you'll even see G-U-M-U. But Kumu. He is the former boss, one of the bosses of the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group. That's an al-Qaeda affiliate. Kumu was once the chauffeur, the driver for bin Laden. This guy's from Derna. And the U.S. government knows everything about him because he was held in Guantanamo Bay prison camp for 4 to 5 years. He was captured and then held until September 2007 when he was sent back to his native Libya, and then he was unwisely, very unwisely, set free by Gaddafi in an amnesty in 2010. Now, people have to understand one of the reasons why Guantanamo still exists is that it's a prison camp, but it's also a training camp. And this is widely misunderstood. It is a training camp. Within it, you have brainwashing going on. You have courses, training, and so forth. Generally speaking, once you're in Guantanamo Bay, the way you get out is to become a double agent working for the CIA. There was a guy called Shiri, who I think has just been killed in Yemen. The same story. Spends a couple of years in Guantanamo, is sent back, sets up Al-Qaeda, starts killing people, and then, then of course the countermeasures can sometimes kill them. But in the case of Kumu, his forces are the ones that came and killed Ambassador Stevens. So here's the problem you have to answer. Why would a CIA double agent, a CIA asset, kill the American ambassador who was such a key guy in providing the troops, right, the infantry really, from Libya to Turkey that they want to deploy into Syria? And they're in the middle of really desperately trying to get more because the ones they've sent in so far have been decimated by the Syrian army, and they need reinforcements. So that's really the problem. And that is what I would then say. This points to the Mormon Mafia. And the Mormon Mafia simply means the faction that would do that, and I'm sure there are lots and lots of actual card-carrying Mormons in there. Now, the interesting story, the Republicans are attempting to muddy the waters, right? Clearly, the Romney people, first of all, they don't want any attention on the film. Well, because they made the film, right? Their top foreign policy guy is up to his neck on the film. But they also don't really want any attention to what actually happened. It's very interesting. According to Fox News, 3 days after the September 11th killings, we had none other than CIA Director General David Petraeus gave a briefing to the members of the House Intelligence Committee in which he said this in Benghazi, this attack, was an out-of-control demonstration. It was a demonstration that went violent, and they were there to protest the Islamophobic YouTube video, but it got out of hand, and that's how he explained it. Now, according to Fox News, the source that tells them this is shocked. They're shocked that the great General Petraeus is telling them this. So this is a very interesting problem. Petraeus is a darling of these neocon networks who are absolutely on board with Romney. So you wonder, is Petraeus helping Romney against Obama? I think he is. And you could say Petraeus is actually the source, right? What Biden claimed in the debate, right? Biden said, the intelligence community told us it was a demonstration that had gone violent. And indeed they did. And here's Petraeus documented 3 days after the fact in the face of Republican opposition, sticking to a story that it was a demonstration that got out of hand.
The point is that it wasn't a demonstration, right?
No, this is a little bit harder to say. And you said there's no demonstration at all. That I don't know. There might have been a demonstration at some point during the day. But primarily, the thing that killed the ambassador is not a demonstration, and it's not people who lost their heads in a demonstration. It's Kumu and the Ansar al-Sharia, who are not there to demonstrate. These are killers. Now, here's another thing now. The security. Why didn't the ambassador have security, right? The Republicans obviously say Obama's responsible. First of all, this is crazy on the face of it. If anybody's responsible, it's Hillary Clinton. She's the Secretary of State, not Obama, right? Little personnel requests inside the State Department from diplomatic missions are not sent to the White House. This is absolutely off the wall. If you want, Hillary Clinton is the one. So they're not interested in that because she's going to retire anyway. It's interesting that at the hearings held by the ISA committee, Darrell Issa, richest man in Congress apparently, his leadoff witness was Special Forces Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Wood of the Utah National Guard. How about that? As soon as you hear Utah, you have to figure it's either a Mormon or an ally of the Mormons. And what did this interesting Lieutenant Colonel Wood have to say? He said he had requested reinforcements, right? He wanted more people sent there to defend the embassy. But it turned out from the testimony of other witnesses that the motivation, in other words, Wood never bothered to fill out the complete application, if you will. He never substantiated, right? What's the danger? And again, you have to look at it from their point of view. Here, we're getting along great with these terrorists. Why do we have to worry? Well, of course you do. You do have to worry, but Wood never made that clear. So I would discount the testimony of any Mormon. I'm afraid it is a very tight-knit group, and they want Romney. Now, the person who would have been responsible was Charlene Lamb, Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for International Programs in the Diplomatic Security Bureau of the State Department. Now, this lady is a cop, and she brought along an interesting photograph. It's a commercially available satellite picture, probably Google Earth or something like this, which shows the U.S. consulate in Benghazi and surrounding areas. As soon as she brought this out, another Mormon went wild, and that's Congressman Jason Chaffetz. This Chaffetz was touted by Issa as the prime mover of the whole demonstration. So Chaffetz starts yelling, point of order, point of order. These are classified materials. These are sources and methods, totally inappropriate. Shut it down. Take down this picture. And the Secretary Lamb said, oh, look, this is unclassified. This is off the internet. No. Chaffetz goes wild. I was there in Libya. They told me that I should never talk about what you're talking about here today. And first of all, ISIS says, leave it up. And then they whisper in his ear for 5 minutes. And then he finally says, take it down. Now, what is it that's revealed? Well, what's revealed is that there's a CIA base nearby, that one of these annexes is a CIA base. And it has, some say 7, some say 12 highly trained CIA operatives. Now, this is roughly the equivalent of the site security team, the SST, that this Mormon colonel I mentioned before said he requested. So the State Department didn't send it, but the CIA had it there anyway. Maybe that was the reason. They said, we don't need 2. We already got 1. So it's this is called a rapid response team, rapid response force of 7 to 12 members. And this is now the big question. Suppose it's a 7 or 12 member CIA team. When the attack on Ambassador Stevens took place, where was the CIA rapid response force? Why didn't they fight? And they didn't. They were nowhere to be found. They were AWOL. They ran away. So here we have a CIA asset killing Ambassador Stevens, and the nearest significant CIA asset, right, which is it's quite a large team for someplace like Benghazi normally, they don't lift a finger to save his life. How about that? Do you smell a fault? I think that's already highly interesting.
Well, it is very interesting, and I remember I read about a lot of what you're talking about on the internet about this congressional hearing and this kerfuffle over these satellite photos. I'm speaking with economic historian and author Webster Tarpley. Today's show, the CIA Mormon Mafia and the Benghazi Killings. I'm Bonnie Faulkner. This is Guns and Butter. What about a nearby U.S. safe house that did fight off an attack? Now, why wasn't Stevens there?
These are all good questions. The thing that I would add to this is the existence of the CIA base was already in the public domain on September 23rd, New York Times article, Eric Schmidt, Helene Cooper, Michael S. Schmidt. They say when the U.S. personnel fled late on September 11th, when Stevens was already dead, 24 American personnel leave Benghazi, including 12 CIA operatives and contractors who had played a crucial role and so on and so forth. So they're already there, and they didn't contribute to helping him. Now, the other part of the security, this is also very interesting. On the chart and announced publicly in these ISA hearings on Wednesday afternoon, there's something called the February 17th Martyrs Brigade, and we know who these people are. They are part of the terror militias that were unleashed by NATO against Gaddafi starting in February of last year. They actually had barracks. They some of them lived there permanently. They were supposed to be the first backup. In other words, there were some Libyan guards, there were some other guards, there was a couple of SEALs and other things like this, maybe even a couple of Marines. But we had the CIA off in one corner, and then we got the Martyrs Brigade off in another corner. The interesting thing about the February 17th Martyrs Brigade is that they also have a track record of working for the CIA. And here's what it is. At the beginning of the Libyan fighting, one important Gaddafi general went over to the rebels, and this is this guy, Younis, Younis, and he became the military commander of the rebels, sort of trying to go from east to west, to get to Tripoli. However,
yes, I remember that. Now, they assassinated him, right?
Yeah, very early on, another general by the name of Khalifa Haftar, or Haftar, Hafter, was shipped over from Langley, from CIA headquarters. This is somebody who had been living in Vienna, Virginia, I think, within a couple of miles of the Langley headquarters for a couple of years. He is somebody who says in a book that he published in France that he had been paid by the CIA for operations against Gaddafi in the past. So Khalifa Haftar is the CIA candidate to become the commanding general of the Libyan rebels. So he's shipped over there. And then what breaks out is a rivalry between Younis, who had stayed in the country, served under Gaddafi, other things going on, and Haftar, who had been an expatriate, clearly working for the CIA. They clashed. And the solution to this was, at a certain point, the February 17th Martyrs Brigade assassinated Younis and a couple of colonels on his staff because they claimed that he had killed some of their relatives. And at that point, then, the CIA candidate takes over. So this is a pretty good, again, prima facie case that the February 17th Martyrs Brigade is itself a CIA asset. So now look what we've got. The CIA asset Kumu comes to kill the ambassador. The CIA Rapid Response Force runs away, does nothing, hides, we don't know. And the CIA asset February 17th Martyrs Brigade also does nothing. I don't know. If you're in the Democratic Party, I would think you'd make something out of this. Now, here's another interesting aspect to this thing. One of the things we've learned about the background of Ambassador Stevens comes from some Stratfor emails that were somehow obtained by Al Akhbar newspaper of Beirut, Lebanon. And they're writing about a guy who was hired by the U.S. He's a CIA veteran named James F. Smith. He's a former director of Blackwater, became the boss of SCG International, a private security firm. This is in Al Akhbar of March 19th of this year. They've got these emails from Stratfor intelligence agency that talk about this. So this is after the death of Gaddafi. Smith is sent by the U.S. government to talk to the Syrian opposition in Turkey. How can they help in regime change? And this guy, James F. Smith, works together with Dr. Walid Fares. Now, Dr. Walid Fares, we mentioned it before, he is the Lebanese Maronite component, or one of them, of this Islamophobia network. He's featured in that report from the Center for American Progress. And they work together with Congresswoman Sue Myrick of North Carolina, reactionary Republican Islamophobe, on how to complete regime change in Syria. So the interesting thing then is that Dr. Walid Fares is another top official of the Romney campaign. He is along with Bolton, he is a special advisor to Mitt Romney, co-chair of Romney's Middle East Advisory Group. When his name was announced in October of last year, he was attacked by Mother Jones, by the Daily Beast, Politico, Salon, New Republic, Al Jazeera, and so forth. Fares has boasted that Romney promised him a high-ranking White House job helping to craft U.S. policy in the Middle East after 2012. Now, that's also interesting. In other words, you see the people around Stevens who might have been, knowledgeable about him include some very, 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 very strange individuals. And finally, I wanted to point out that when Hillary Clinton appeared to try to defend her department, I guess, on Friday afternoon at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, she was introduced by none other than General Brent Scowcroft, the gray eminence of the Mormon Mafia. So this is a powerful network, and I think you can just see the connections, right? The institutional affiliations of the people that I've described. The Mormon Mafia appears as the prime suspect on the Benghazi side, and this Islamophobia network, dominated by John Bolton, appears on the film side. And you put those together, and that's what has been, I think, playing a very important role in the presidential campaign. And that was the goal, an October surprise to Carterize Obama, and the people doing it, again, the CIA Mormon Mafia. And look at everything the CIA has to answer for in Benghazi. Why did Kumo, your asset, kill the ambassador? Why didn't that CIA Rapid Response Force intervene? And what about your in-country assets, the February 17th Martyrs Brigade?
You have a new book out, Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover of America, Polygamy, Theocracy, and Subversion. I don't yet have a copy, but I understand that you view Mormonism as more of a political movement rather than a religion. How so?
Well, first of all, because it is founded as two things that I think are of really great importance. One is that Mormonism is not Christianity. It is a separate religion. It is not Judaism. It is not Christianity. It is not Islam. It is something clearly distinct from all three. And perhaps the easiest way to see that is on the question of polytheism. The three religions of the book that I've just mentioned are all monotheistic. Mormonism, by contrast, is a wild congeries of polytheism. The gods in Mormonism are limitless, and the whole status of God is radically different from in any of the faiths that we've just mentioned. Right? One of the Mormon theological mottos is, "As man now is, God once was," and this means God, meaning the chief God, the top God in the Mormon pantheon, and the pantheon is located on the planet Kolob, was once a flesh and blood human being like any of us, although only male. But this Elohim, or whoever he is, the Mormon equivalent of Jehovah, is somebody who was once a flesh and blood man who worked his way up through, I guess, the practice of Mormonism. Joseph Smith is another example of exactly the same thing. So as man now is, God once was, and as God now is, man can be. In other words, any male, and especially any male who gets at least 3 wives, I think is usually the cutoff, has a chance to become a god. In other words, the salvation, right, what can we say, soteriology, I think. The notion of salvation in Mormonism is that if you make the grade through eternal progression, you too can become a god ruling over your own planet and enjoying the services of your celestial harem of spirit wives that will allow you to generate new spirits, which will have the chance then to become gods in their own right on other planets. Now, that is polytheism. And I would say that is it's very disturbing, because the problem with polytheism is that polytheism is coherent with a mental life in society, which is probably antithetical to modern civilization as we've known it. In other words, it's the polytheism belongs to an earlier phase of human development, right? The monotheistic ones, and I guess the origins of monotheism is often it's attributed to Akhenaton, right, in Egypt, that he said, from now on, boys, it's going to be the sun's disk and nothing else, right? None of these semi-animalistic creatures that you have in the temples, right? One of the theses is that then influenced Moses or the Hebrews or others. But you get the idea that we'd be taking a giant step backward to polytheism. And I think anybody coming from Judaism, Islam, or Christianity would, I think, be able to see that right away. The notion of becoming a god, that you too can become a god, is absolutely alien to any of those traditions. And these ideas that God is not a spirit but a fleshly being, in terms of Christianity, right? The Trinity, the Mormons say there is no Trinity. These are just three individuals who more or less work together. There is no idea that God created the universe, right? You look at the Christian creed, which I include in my book just to make it clear, right, that if you believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth and all things visible and invisible, that's not the Mormon God. The Mormon God is somebody who arrives later. Christ arrives even later than that. And it's not a creator. It's more like a manager or a coordinator. And it's very strange. It's also festooned with Freemasonic elements. One of the things you have to be ready for in Mormonism is that you better die with the magic underwear on, right? The magic underwear, the temple garments that Romney wears. I mean, you can see it. You can see some pictures of him out on the trail. He's wearing the typical undershirt of the magic underwear. That underwear is festooned with Freemasonic symbols, hex signs, and other things that are supposed to speed you on your way. And by the time you get to your appointment there in the other world, you better have the handshake and you better know the passwords, because that is the basis of your salvation. So you can see that's not Christianity at all, and not the other monotheistic religions.
I'm speaking with economic historian and author Webster Tarpley. Today's show, the CIA Mormon Mafia and the Benghazi Killings. I'm Bonnie Faulkner. This is Guns and Butter.
The other interesting thing is the prominence of revenge. Joseph Smith is obsessed with revenge. Brigham Young wants revenge. Brigham Young is the most extreme. Brigham Young's thesis is the American people committed deicide, right? They rejected Joseph Smith. They wouldn't bow down to him. They wouldn't make him their ruler, president, and king. The Mormons made him king of the kingdom of God in 1844. The Americans then, a mob killed him. And, of course, it's outrageous that he was killed by a mob. But out of this, Brigham Young derives the idea that what is needed is blood atonement, which means human sacrifice. That's what it means, that some people have to die to wash away the guilt of having killed Joseph Smith. Now, in Christianity, you would say, well, the sacrifice of Christ is, it far outweighs any of the sins of humanity put together. So this part is done. That would be St. Anselm of Canterbury. But no, under Mormonism, since it was done to Joseph Smith and the Mormons it's beyond all measure, and that means people have to die. So blood atonement, and I guess I better get right to the heart of the matter. Until about 1927, right after the death of Joseph Smith, so from the time of Brigham Young in the mid-1840s until about 1927, the liturgy of the Mormon temple, in other words, the divine service, what they call the temple endowment, included a blood-curdling pledge to exact revenge, and that means kill, people from the United States, i.e. Americans, Gentiles, as they would say, to get revenge for what was done to Joseph Smith and indeed his brother Hiram Smith at the jail in Carthage, Illinois in June of 1844. And that means that Governor George Romney, from the time he was born, in the early part of the last century, say for his first 20 years easily, was reciting this blood oath, which binds 4 generations, according to the internal features of the oath. So that would mean George Romney, Mitt Romney, Tag Romney, and Tag's kids are all bound by the oath of exacting blood revenge from the United States. I don't think it's wise to put somebody in the White House who comes from this kind of a religious tradition and who has never repudiated it. And in the case of Romney, it's quite the contrary. I've seen 2 books here by Romney. One is his book Turnaround, which is his self-congratulatory story of saving the Salt Lake City Winter Olympics of 2002. Well, what he was doing out there was covering up for Mike Leavitt, the Mormon governor of Utah, who is today Mitt Romney's transition boss and is considered the likely White House chief of staff for Mitt Romney. Mitt went out there to protect Leavitt from going to jail for corruption. And other top Mormons, perhaps even the top officials of the Mormon Church, might have been involved in the international bribery, right? Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. They gave out at least $1 million worth of bribes and probably more. Romney went out there to do that. So he writes this book about turnaround, right, how he turned it around. And in that book, he says, my relatives had to flee to Mexico to flee religious persecution. Well, I'm sorry. There was no religious persecution at that point in the 1880s except polygamy. Polygamy was banned. And the Mormon argument was, you can't stop us from having polygamous marriages because those are our religious rights, our First Amendment religious rights under the Constitution. And, of course, this is a specious argument because the First Amendment protects belief, divine services, worship, all this stuff. But when you get into the area of overt acts, then those fall under the purview of the civil magistrate. In other words, the public law. And you can't say, well, my religion says polygamy is required. You might as well say, my religion says widow burning is required. Or with Brigham Young, you could say my religion requires human sacrifice. If somebody comes forward and says, I demand the right to have human sacrifice because my religion commands me, at that point, the modern state has to say, no, sorry, that's an overt act and it's illegal. Later on in Romney's other book about no apologies, right, that he'll never apologize, unlike, I guess he claims Obama apologizes. I don't know. He has the same idea that it was religious persecution that drove his family to flee the United States. Now, this is very embarrassing for him because what it shows is when it comes to Romney family values, patriotism to the United States is trumped by polygamy. Polygamy is infinitely more important than patriotism to the United States. This is a big problem for him because he's got to come on as a hyper-patriotic, super chauvinistic, in-your-face, flag-waving, Constitution-thumping patriot. And you look at the history, nobody in his family was ever in the military, right? They never served the United States Army. They're chicken hawks. I mean, you can choose not to do that, but then please don't be a warmonger at the same time, right? This was the argument against the neocons, and it is against the Mormons, right? So Romney, all of his sons, their kids, nobody ever volunteered. What they do is go abroad to become missionaries for the Mormon Church. So we look at Leavitt, not just Romney, but this guy Mike Leavitt. Here's the rundown on Mike Leavitt in a nutshell. He's implicated in the corruption of the 2002 Mormon Salt Lake City Winter Olympics. He was asked in the buildup to those Olympics, there was a lot of attention to polygamy, right? Because this put Utah under the spotlight. And he was asked, what do you think about polygamy? And his answer was the same. He said, I think polygamy may be covered by religious freedom. Oh, my gosh. If you ask Senator Hatch of Utah, he will tell you the same thing, that some of his best friends are polygamists. And there's a whole polygamous colony on the border between Utah and Arizona. It's called Hilldale, Utah, and Colorado City, Arizona. This was the area controlled by Warren Jeffs. Warren Jeffs was the prophet of the fundamentalist Latter-day Saints Church. And if you go to Colorado City, Arizona, the mayor is a polygamist, the chief of police is a polygamist, the city council are all polygamists, the fire chief is polygamist. This is horrendous. And what it means is, it means rape. It means the statutory rape of young girls. That's, in a nutshell, what it comes down to. And this is bipartisan, by the way. Janet Napolitano, when she was governor of Arizona, she never lifted a finger against these polygamous communities. And the same thing goes for Bruce Babbitt, who was in the Clinton cabinet, or Fife Symington, or others. At the end of one of my chapters on polygamy, I quote Penny Peterson, who's an anti-polygamy activist in Arizona, and she says, to get away with the rape of young girls, all you have to say is that you're a polyg, or plig, meaning polygamist, out in these areas. Now, one of the things that a Romney presidency would bring, and you can see it, is a massive upsurge of polygamy, because the proclivity to enforce any of these laws would instead of being zero, it would become negative. I mean, we could probably see, tax incentives for polygamists. So this is what it comes down to. Now,
well, let me ask you this: what is the status of women under a policy of polygamy?
Let me I just have to go back to this the political side, but
okay.
Maybe we want to do polygamy first. If we look at newspaper accounts, right? The one thing you see in the 1840s, 1850s, 1860s, and 70s is that the Mormon paradise of Utah, Deseret, as they called it, right? And it was designed to be an independent country. It was designed to be an enemy state against the United States. That was how it was designed. You'll see that this is one of the biggest international scandals in the world. And you got all sorts of people writing about Brigham Young and his wives, right? Brigham Young probably had 75 wives. Joseph Smith, the low estimate is he had about 35 wives. The high estimate is about 85 wives. Middle estimate about 55 wives. One of the big themes is women who have been more or less kidnapped and taken to Salt Lake City and who want to get out. And some of them can't get out. One of the cases we have here is, I guess this is after the Civil War already, but a guy called Andrus, right? You'll recognize some of these names, Andrus, right? And Andrus became Secretary of the Interior, I think, under Kennedy. So here's Milo Andrus. He has 11 wives. One of them begins objecting to polygamy. She's planning to escape from Salt Lake City. Andrus goes to Brigham Young. What should he do? And Brigham Young says, the only way to save the sister's soul was to cut her throat. So the woman falls on her knees begging for life. Andrus cuts her throat from ear to ear and holds her in an iron grip until she stops struggling. That's actually pre-Civil War. You've got a lot of people saying, that polygamy is essentially slavery for women. And remember, it goes on for quite a while. If slavery is basically wiped out between 1865 and 1870, or 1863 and 1870, since we do have the Emancipation Proclamation, the polygamy goes on at least into the 1890s and really much longer, because a lot of those marriages continue. It preserves the plantation system, and this is the way it would work. Southern Utah, where the Romney family lived, is the most backward. And here the typical thing would be a poor Mormon farmer with 5 to 6 wives, and what it became was the wives would be the field hands, and the Mormon farmer would be the overseer. But then we got to think about also polygamy. Let's start with maybe Joseph Smith, the prophet, right, son of God, as he would say, or God. Some of his spirit wives or celestial marriages, as he would say, some of his celestial relations were with married women. So this means for him it was polygamy, but then from the point of view of the woman, this is polyandry. In other words, one woman who has her normal husband and Joseph Smith. So polyandry, also a very problematic relation, not heard of at all really in Western civilization, nor is polygamy, with very, very few exceptions. Then later on, you have a Mormon polygamist would marry a woman, and with the idea that he's going to marry her daughters, 1 or 2 daughters, as soon as they get to a certain age. And in one case, we have a little girl who says her plan in life is to marry Pa. So she's going to marry her father. This is not good. Another case, we have a Mormon polygamist who marries a woman and her granddaughter. So they're both going to go into the harem and become celestial spirit wives. So, well, what can we say? One of Brigham Young's daughters, in a moment of candor, says that if Salt Lake City had a roof, it would be the biggest whorehouse in the world, and it's chaos. I mean, it's a situation of antinomianism, and I guess that's really a very, very key concept. One of the basic ideas of Mormonism is that the end of the world is near, and the saints are exempt from the normal moral law.
There's something happening here. Yeah. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there.
I've been speaking with Webster Tarpley. Today's show has been the CIA Mormon Mafia and the Benghazi Killings. Webster Tarpley is an economic historian, author, and lecturer. He is author of Against Oligarchy, 9/11 Synthetic Terror Made in the USA, Obama, the Postmodern Coup, The Making of a Manchurian Candidate, Obama, the Unauthorized Biography, and co-author of George Bush, The Unauthorized Biography. His prescient economic work, Surviving the Cataclysm, A Study of the World Financial Crisis, is now out in paperback. His new book, Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover of America, Polygamy, Theocracy, and Subversion, is available online from progressivepress.com. That's progressivepress.com. An ebook version is also available. Visit his website at www.tarpley.net. That's tarpley.net. Email him at tarpley@tarpley.net. Guns and Butter is produced and edited by Bonnie Faulkner and Yarrow Mako. To make comments or order copies of shows, email us at blfaulkner@yahoo.com. That's BLFAULKNER@yahoo.com. Visit our website at www.gunsandbutter.org. That's GUNSANDBUTTER.org.